How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Okay, guys, we're going to do it one more time. We are going to talk about this gentleman right here, Brian Entin. And guys, I don't know. It's just more of just providing information. I don't want people to think it's an outright attack, but to be honest with you, me and Russ were into covering the Nancy Guthrie case, and eventually it just all shifted into a narrative, an attack on a sheriff, whether he's worthy of the attack or not. It's just not the timing. It's becoming political discussions. I mean, we are so far away from what we are trying to accomplish for Nancy. And to be honest with you, all I see, and I'm just going to put it out there, is just a giant gaslight. Because I'm going to tell you something right now. When I mentioned that I was going to do this show, and I usually like to ask people, what their thoughts are. You got people right now that are actually attacking the family. One here is Annie's trying to cover up she and her husband's involvement. That's why she waited to call her sister. They're attacking Savannah. I mean, it's so far from what is actually helpful. And what I like to do, what Russ likes to do is, we're not chasing updates for a story to get more views, to get clicks. We're trying to find relevant information that matters. And when there isn't relevant updates, we actually go back and revisit areas to see if there's something that we can go deeper in. Like I did a show with a mental health expert on dealing with ambiguous loss, because it's something that they're going through. We try to take what we can from these cases. And I'll be honest with you, when I first started doing true crime, I was following Brian. I was following SF Investigates. And then all of a sudden you start to realize that they're not in it for the right reasons. And a lot of people are going to hate that I'm saying that, but I have to go with my gut. And my gut has survived, has helped me survive 24 years working in corrections and dealing with people who are expert manipulators. And my biggest thing that turned me off or turned me on to Brian Entin, but turned me off from Brian Entin, if you will, was the Emmanuel Harrow case. And he exposed the Perkins operation. And, which is a very undercover operation. It must maintain the highest level of secrecy because there's safety and security involved. And he exposed it. And of course, I guess it was Riverside. I forgot the PD, the investigative authority. They denied it, and they denied it for right reasons because it was an ongoing investigation and an effort to find Emmanuel Harrow. So they were kind of doing it two ways: one at Jake, one at Rebecca. And we did an episode to kind of explain what the Perkins operation was once he dropped it. And then I was like, wow, this doesn't feel right because I'm in law enforcement. Russ is in law enforcement, and you don't leak shit like that out. I mean, outside the fact that in our profession, you lose your job almost immediately. It makes total sense why you would lose your job because it's the violation of what's needed for one to safely do to safely do an investigation like Perkins. I mean, you need the highest level of integrity because you got to protect all sources. Plus, not everybody needs to be in the know. It just violates the integrity at the highest of levels. And then when later on, when it was at one of the conferences, the PD did say, yes, we ran a Perkins operation. All he cared about was the fact that, I told you I was telling the truth. It had nothing to do with, maybe that shouldn't have been released. Maybe we were so close to finding Emmanuel Harrow that shouldn't have been released at all. And that's why they said that they weren't doing it. And that just turned me on to who I believe he really is, which eventually turned me off of him. I mean, Russ, did you get the same vibe?
Well, this is what I'll say in that what we've done, what we've seen, and what we've heard from the predominant media cultist journalists, as it were, has been really just a real attempt to try and just keep the case alive in the sense of always having something to report. And I think that he's probably kind of the paradigm of that all. Do anything, say anything, get some clicks. I mean, he was, reporting on, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was reporting on, what the SWAT teams were doing in the area. And it just became this huge flow of information at any cost. And some of it was right and some of it was wrong. And some of it seemed really, truly manufactured. Now we might, compare him to what TMZ did. And by that metric, maybe he's a lot better, but that doesn't mean that he's not terrible at the same time.
Exactly. And then we're going to get into that, because that's the biggest concern. Is I'm going to mention this real quick, but we're going to cover it in one of the bullets later on. There's going to be people that are involved in this case from both sides, those that could be victims and those that are actually involved in obviously committing the crime. And we don't know if the threat is still active, and why we're trying to maintain the highest level of integrity to maybe protect Savannah and her family, Annie and her family, Cameron, whatever it is. We're exposing things that they really shouldn't know. We're exposing things that work that was done on the house, following the feds as they go door to door, and then pretty much going behind the feds, talking to the people that they spoke to find out what was being asked. That's not responsible reporting. And I know people want the information, but guys, you have to see it for what it is. So the first question I got for you, Russ, is, as members of the public, when you look at this coverage, does it feel like the story is about Nancy, the Guthrie family, or does it feel like it's about Brian and his coverage of them?
Well, I think it's actually a step removed from that. I think that it's about getting clicks and selling ads. I mean, he went behind and was, asking these other people in the area what were they asked about, and rather than take a deep dive even into that, which he shouldn't have been doing, obviously, then he focuses on the fact that January the 24th, and he just blows that up into what apparently, I can't say this for sure, but apparently, just blew that up in order to blow it up. And, it was just kind of a common thread of something they were looking at, not a hot lead, I don't think. But what if it had been a hot lead? What if that had been the one piece that was going to put it all together? And suddenly you tip off the kidnappers, or maybe, you blow some other source, and then that leads to what maybe we have now. We don't have any way of knowing what damage might have been done. And this was done not even for the expediency of getting out there and being first and telling the story. He wasn't telling us the story. He was telling us a story that was designed to get clicks and sell ads.
Yeah, and as I've been watching it, guys, and I know a lot of people have also been messaging me, these constant updates, these constant, attack on the sheriffs. Well, we called that was going to wind up happening when the updates lessen, but they knew that this was the story that was bringing in clicks and views. They would find a way to keep the narrative alive, and what they do is they bring in controversy. That's what they do. In this case, the controversy came with the sheriff, and I get there may be concerns, but this isn't really the right time to be exploiting those concerns, because right now we should be doing what we can to help the sheriff, let's find Nancy. If these are mistakes that he made, fine, and whatever it is. But right now we could figure that out later. Let's all get ourselves on the same page, because Nancy, and I don't care what anybody says, is being lost amongst this 100%. And now sometimes it's hard for me to cover it, because I want to cover what could be a kidnapping, and all of a sudden it's political. And in my position, I really can't have any conversations related to political stuff. So now I have to try to maneuver around all the politics to try to get a good dialogue here. And that's one of the things that's starting to get me upset about true crime, is true crime sometimes catches into politics, because they are stories that are trending, and somewhere along the line, politics leak in. And now all of a sudden, it becomes more difficult for someone like myself, who is still on the job, to talk about or to provide insider input, because it's no longer about the case anymore. It's just about politics and getting a sheriff out of office. And it's like, well, hey, Gange, I heard you've been covering the Nancy Guthrie case. Yes. Well, you can't do that anymore because the case is about the sheriff, and right now you can't get involved in discussion. Well, I'm not talking about the sheriff as much anymore. I'm trying to talk about the Nancy. It doesn't matter because it automatically goes into that discussion, which means I'll post up a video that's strictly about, something that pertains to Nancy Guthrie, maybe an understanding of something, or maybe the Guthrie family, and you'll get comments right off the bat that put it right back to the sheriff again, and right back to the sheriff, and all of a sudden you got controversy in your comments, and it's not. It doesn't do good for my channel. It's not what I want to promote. But then you get this all coming because that's all this one person wants to do. They're going to push this person out, and that's the narrative right now. They're siding with the union. I get it, but this is not the time for these union battles. And what gets me upset is maybe there is a concern. I get it. I get it. But this is the time to figure this out. Is that what we're doing now? Or should we try to find a way to help it, narrow it out, and then say, you know what, you made these mistakes. We'll have to revisit this later. But in the meantime, how can we help? Because right now, Nancy is a priority. So the first bullet I got is the pressure interview. This is what made me wanted to go back to Brian Entin. I was going to be quiet on it, but lately, I don't know, I just see him more and more. And basically, he's trying to crowdsource, I guess, the public for an interview with Savannah. So in an April 8th, 9th, 2026 run of coverage, I think this was in US Weekly. I saw it also in Parade, maybe AOL or Yahoo, but I saw it. Brian Entin publicly said he would really like to interview Savannah Guthrie, and that he has behind the scenes been trying to make that happen. He added, if anybody reads this and has a connection, that would be amazing, just because I've been so close to the case and I have so much sympathy for her and what her family has gone through. I didn't like that word amazing, by the way. If I got an interview with her, it'd be amazing. I mean, that to me in itself says a lot. So the context is, this is not a quiet professional pitch to NBC or Savannah's representatives. He makes this ask in US Weekly and similar mass audience outlets, effectively inviting the public to act as his booking team and use their connections to get him to Savannah, who is the daughter of Nancy Guthrie. Now, Nancy had already been missing at this time for weeks. We know that, and Savannah was still in acute grief when this was published. Now, this is where I think it's being exploited, is calling the potential interview amazing. I thought that was unique, Russ, the verbiage there. Frames it as an exciting frames as exciting get for him rather than something clearly led or requested by Savannah or her family. It positions the interview as a prize and a big moment for his coverage instead of something obviously designed first for Nancy's case or Savannah's well-being. So that was another leak. So Russ, speaking just as viewers, whatever, how does it land with you when a reporter publicly asks if anyone has a connection that would be amazing about a grieving daughter? Does that feel appropriate, or does it feel like chasing a trophy interview?
Well, obviously, it seems like he's just interested in chasing the interview. But I would pull back from that thumb in that it's not that one thing that he's done. It's the way he's conducted himself along the way. He just keeps pushing and biting little other things, and kind of even pushing parts of the story that may not be impactful, may not be true. And it's just kind of, I would say, the totality of the coverage that he's provided. It's always been about, trying to, break something. It's always been about, trying to, find something wrong that the sheriff did. It's always been about, trying to find something wrong that the team did. And they're not in a position really to, push back at all. They can't go into the things that they know about the case specifically. They're not in a position to defend themselves really. And so all he's done is, like really muddy the reporting. And, but I would also say that that's true of, 99% of the coverage that's been out there. Just truthfully, the idea of journalistic integrity is dead in the United States.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm going to go over some of the stuff he's done, Russ. And I stuck on the keyword amazing here because to me that was another leak. That was something else that within context, same thing with the Manuel Harrow case, that told me how also inflated he's become. So you're telling me that this interview would be amazing. Why? Because it's you doing the interview? I mean, I thought the best interview was who she did the interview with. Because when she did the interview with Dateline, she did it with not just the network she trusted, but the people that she knew. To her, we may see them as journalists, but to her, they were her friends. And she's vulnerable. So she went to them because one, she's connected to the network, but number two is because she knew they would hold her up. And to be honest with you, that's a choice for her to make if she decides to do it, because she doesn't have to do an interview. She doesn't have to tell the public anything. But she did because I think she felt that, you know what, because there's been so much love for my mom, let me provide something. Let me give something. But to go ahead and go on some of these public venues and say, if anybody has a connection out there, that would be that pressure is just not needed at this time. And then again, to inflate yourself by saying that interview would be amazing. Now, I'm sure there's many contexts that you could take that in, but let's be honest. That would be amazing. It would be amazing to just in general talk to a woman or her family who is going through the most tragic thing that could ever happen to anyone. That's all you get is that would be amazing. So you know what, Russ, let's say something happened in your family and I came out and said, Russ, you should talk to me. That would be an amazing opportunity. Amazing opportunity for who? Why would it be amazing for us? So who am I really saying it's amazing for? Me. I mean, Russ, right? Would you agree with that, Russ? We're on the same page with that, right?
Absolutely. It's just, I would just say that his approach to things is not one of empathy, not one of sympathy, but it's really rather one of opportunity. And the opportunity is all pointed back at him. And I would say that, probably the worst thing that I think you can say about a person is that they're an opportunist and they're willing to, overlook the negatives of what they're doing and what they're saying and how they're conducting themselves in order to sell ads, to get clicks, to do whatever it is he's doing. And so, I just do. I think it is distasteful. And I would just say that, but then most of what the media has done with regards to this has been distasteful as well.
Well said. And guys, and it's tough for us to do a show like this because everybody seems to be swinging with that momentum because that's where everything's going. But sometimes it takes, people to say, you know what? I'm not going to go with that because it just doesn't feel right. I'm not going to get swept up in this. And we're going to take a risk here and just present how we feel. Because again, we live on our gut feelings. Okay, so I got another part about the interview he's requesting. So some of the parts he wants to ask her is he wants to ask her about the criticisms about the investigation. And it's not really there to provide a lifeline. So in those same pieces that we talked about above, Entin lays out the dream interview. He would ask Savannah more about her relationship with her mom. So that's just to put some sympathy in the background, but technically that's not what he really wants. And then specifically about the investigation and what she thinks may have happened behind the scenes. That's what he wants because that's what's getting him the views right now. But he doesn't want to sound cold-hearted, so he's got to introduce a softer element first because if he literally said, I want to go after her interpretation of the investigation, that would be wrong. But if I say, I want to find out about her mom a little bit, and as a side note, the side note, to be honest with you, in my opinion, is the sympathy that he's trying to say he has for the family. And is that harsh for me to say? You guys be the judge, but in context, I don't think I'm that far off. So by the time he's saying this, Savannah has already done a deeply personal pre-taped interview with Hoda on Today, promoted as her first long sit down about the disappearance. She chose her own network, her colleagues and friends, and a controlled environment she trusts. In that interview and earlier appeals, she emphasized that law enforcement is working tirelessly around the clock trying to bring her home, trying to bring Nancy home. Entin acknowledges he has seen Savannah's comment and appeals, yet he frames his desired follow up around what went wrong behind the scenes with the investigation. That lines up with the editorial arc he's been building from Where is Nancy into Who Failed Nancy, and risked using her grief to reinforce his critique of law enforcement rather than following her lead. So, Russ, when someone in Savannah's position is publicly praising investigators because she said they are working tirelessly. So I don't care what anybody else is saying right now. I don't care. I care what she thought, and she gave us just enough. We don't have to dig any further. She says they are working tirelessly, and I even say that to my people when they're overworked and exhausted. That's a way to acknowledge the good that they're doing. So again, when someone in Savannah's position is publicly praising investigators, how does it sit with you to see a reporter still pushing to get her to talk about what went wrong behind the scenes?
Yeah. So can you repeat that again real quick? It was a little bit broken.
Yeah, of course. I said, so when someone in Savannah's position is publicly praising investigators, because she said they've worked tirelessly. I take that as it is a praise. How does it sit with you to see a reporter still pushing to get her to talk about what went wrong behind the scenes? Because tirelessly means, at a deeper level, she's appreciating the effort being done, knowing that the outcome is out of their control.
Yeah. So I think like when you look at things from a perspective like that, it's easy for journalists as a whole to kind of get a whole slew of confirmation bias going within the public. So what they do is they cherry pick things, they feed them to the public. It becomes a self-reinforcing dynamic and narrative that tears down whatever this perceived what's the word I'm looking for? This perceived incapacity of law enforcement, this perceived inefficacy of law enforcement. And so then everybody just starts into a feeding frenzy, and they start reinforcing the viewpoint that's been given and assigned to them by the journalists in a way that then that's all they see, that's all they talk about. And then they go back and they look for things that once again reinforce their own viewpoint. And not only is that unfair, and I hate to talk about things that are fair and unfair, but it may not be accurate. It may not be the truth. There may not be anything actually there with regards to any specific thing. I mean, I can think of things in this where I believe that, some criticism is warranted, but I don't think it's everything all the time, and that I can just go in there and cherry pick things and then feed it to, whoever's watching us here on Tier Talk right now, and then have the expectation that then they're going to go out and they're going to only look for the evidence that bolsters the view that I gave them. I think that that's, really kind of not only unfair, but I mean, you just talk about, the hubris of that. I'm going to tell you what the story is, and I don't expect you to go looking for the truth. I expect you to go looking for things that bolster what my opinion is, and now it can be your opinion too. And I just think that that's, inherently biased. And so when we look at things like confirmation bias, it just becomes, a perpetual vicious circle that nobody can get out of now. And I think that's why Nanos is probably done. I'm not saying that there aren't things there that he should, not be removed for. But what I'm saying is that I think that now everybody, perhaps even us included, because it touches everybody, are now biased against him in one way or another. And I think that's I don't think that there's a lot of honesty in that.
Right. And I want to mention something, guys. When I first created Tear Talk, it was a platform for correctional professionals, and it was very purposeful. It was advocating for what I feel the downtrodden, the people that do their job and aren't always noticed because they get generalized to the media sweep of one negative action. And then we're all bad, like one bad apple, and that's not the case. So eventually, if you saw something negative, we would come out and try to remind people of the professionalism and also sometimes give a better understanding. So we're used to advocating. When I was doing the true crime stuff, I mean, I knew for a fact eventually it would go from just reporting facts to somewhere along the line stopping, revisiting certain areas of the case and trying to see where we can find purpose. And that's not going to shake. That's not going to change, or else I can't be someone that just puts in facts. I have to have something that's meaningful and purposeful. And this is kind of why a discussion like this had to happen for me, because how many times am I watching it and then just like, I can't deal with this anymore. It's like this big giant gaslight. And then when I just saw recently that I knew it was going to happen. And guys, if you watch my videos, it says it. Eventually, he's going to try to get that interview for himself. He wants to get that interview with Savannah because Savannah's tragedy, the Guthrie family tragedy, I apologize, just Savannah is centered of it, not because she is the one most affected. It's because she is the center. She's the one speaking, so she does come to me first. But the Guthrie family, is that interview in his mind would be awesome because it's the win of a lifetime. I want to revisit one more thing about the law enforcement because it is important. So we already know that Savannah already spoke, and she said law enforcement is working, right? So in multiple public messages, including an Instagram video and coverage by routers and business insiders, Savannah says law enforcement, again, is working tirelessly around the clock, trying to bring her home, trying to find her. She was taken and we don't know where. And in her sit down with Hoda, she again thanks investigators and asks the public for help while describing how unbearable the situation is. So the context is she and her family are not publicly calling for a media crusade against the sheriff or investigators. She chose NBC and Hoda, not News Nation and Brian, to share her deepest feelings and pleas. There is no public indication that she has invited Entin to step into that space to speak for her, to lead that crusade against the people that are leading the investigation for her mother to be found and possibly ongoing threats to the family. So I don't think it's in our best position to divide the force that's handling all these things. So when the person most affected has already spoken, thanked law enforcement, and chosen her platform, a third-party journalist still pushing to question what went wrong behind the scenes looks less like answering a family request and more like advancing his own storyline. So, Russ, this may be a little repetitive, but if the family hasn't asked, I guess the reporter, let's say the reporter, to be their voice and is already speaking for themselves, I mean, do you think journalists should still try to drag them into their version of the story?
I mean, part of being a journalist is trying to get yourself into a position to actually, gain new information. And, I can't fault them for that. I think that what I can fault them for, though, is the way they go about it and what their true purpose is. Ultimately, we know that all of these media outlets are, concerned with the bottom line. I think that, as a business, you have to be concerned with that. But I think that you have to also be concerned with, your own morality, your own worldview, and you have to try and serve a deeper purpose. I would liken it to, what I currently do in the field of corrections is I provide, reentry and rehabilitation for inmates. It's my job. It's what I get paid to do. But if I don't feel that I have a duty toward it, if I don't feel like I'm, moving the chains forward, if I don't feel like I'm contributing something to my community, to society as a whole, then what am I really involved with it for? To check boxes and to provide reports that say, yeah, did X, Y, and Z today. If I don't have a commitment versus just being compliant with what the lowest base threshold is, then what kind of a professional am I? And I think that that's what I see here. And I think that it's been this way a long time with journalists. We've seen stories over the preceding years, decades, if you will, where the story was fashioned by the predominant media cultists in order to generate views. And I mean, and you can cite these, going back years and years and years. I mean, to the likes of Ted Koppel, for instance. And I can't even remember who it was now. They before Ted Koppel even, rigging up Pintos to blow up when they were impacted, in order to show this to a public that went, oh wow, there really is a problem. These cars are blowing up. So I think that somewhere, somehow, somewhere along the way, these people either lost their humanity or never had it in the first place.
Yeah, and I want to add something here too, guys. So remember, me and Russ, we work in a prison. Obviously, we know that being nice is performative. We actually look at behaviors first, and behaviors and patterns truly tell us who somebody is. So I'm gonna go over certain behaviors here that should be taken in context within a bigger picture, a pattern. And again, it's not one behavior; it's a pattern. And then if you don't allow yourself to see the pattern, that's fine. That's on you. But it's not going to shift what I feel or what Russ's feel. So the first thing I want to talk about the drone that was over the home, which to me is just surveillance and not journalism. And there is a difference there, guys. This is really just surveillance here. But I want to put this in context. If this was your family going through something, that's what you have to filter it as, because when you watch true crime or when you do true crime like we're doing right now, we are technically at some level being intrusive. And we have to be respectful and not be intrusive. That's why we're starting to learn to step back on certain things. And at the end of the day, this isn't about us breaking a story. It's literally what can we do that we feel can be helpful. And in some cases, what I've been doing is going to cases that don't have that much awareness, like the Michaela Settles case, and bringing that into awareness, and then stepping back a little bit and letting people digest it, and then waiting for the next update, not just going crazy and trying to find something else to, I need another update or make something up and to keep it. No, it's like, let me bring the awareness. But at one point, believe it or not, awareness, exploitation could be in the guise of awareness. Well, here I am, I'm covering something just to make it aware. We know what's going on with Nancy. When you went back to Florida, wherever you went back to, you should have, at that point, just let people do what they got to do. We saw the same thing with the Celeste Rivas Hernandez case, where people wanted more information. And then finally they said, screw it, grand jury, because we have to protect the integrity of the case, because the public is making it worse. They're putting shit out there that really, it's just really irrelevant. And who's the lead? Well, the lead is the media that runs with it, because they know if that's the direction the public wants to go, let's feed that direction. Let's keep it moving. And then they become the stars for making that narrative. And obviously when they're wrong, they still fight. They still continue to go. And at this time, it's hard now, because the truth has an obstacle in front of it. The real truth has an obstacle from their truth, in quotes. So Entin has used drone footage to capture and air aerial views of Nancy's home and the surrounding desert, including the back of the property. Coverage shows him using the drone to point out that there are 3 doors at the back of the house and to analyze those doors as potential entry-exit points. This is a drone that, yes, he did have in some of his videos. He even mentions that, I couldn't get the drone out today. He's flying drones over their property. And by the way, remember, their property has no trespassing signs. So he's finding a way to go around those no trespassing signs by going on neighbors' property, flying drones. So his footage and commentary walk viewers through the property from above and behind, where someone could have come in, how they might have left, and what the terrain looks like just beyond the house. Other clips show FBI activity on the roof and around the home, captured and then rebroadcast as part of this of his reporting. He's recording them doing their job, which you don't want the world to see every step we take, because then they can figure out how to get around those steps. I mean, me and Russ can tell you right now, we don't want inmates watching us do searches. Why? Because they can see our patterns. They could see what we look for. They could see how we do it. And next thing you know, it becomes harder for us to find things because they have been allowed to see the systems that should be protected. So the exploitation here is from the family's perspective. Their mother's home is being mapped and dissected on national TV and social media as an object of speculation. From an investigative and safety perspective, detailed real-time views of doors, blind spots, and terrain risk signaling to a perpetrator what the public and law enforcement can see. Given that NBC and law enforcement increased security around Savannah and the Today Show out of caution, turning the property into a tactical diagram on TV could reasonably be seen as information that could be misused by someone who wishes to commit the family harm. We don't have motive yet. We don't know. I know that Nancy it was kidnapped. Does that mean she's the real target? Or are they getting at Nancy so they can get at the family? We don't know. So right now there's something active, and here we are exploiting every weakness. So Russ, if this were your parents' home, would you feel that kind of drone tour and tactical breakdown was respectful and helpful, or would it feel invasive and possibly unsafe?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's something to be said for methods and sources inside law enforcement. I think that when Entin does all of these things, though, he's certainly treading on the sensibilities of the family, and I think that from that particular point of view, that they should be respected more. I think that, and I'm not saying that he didn't do this because I don't know, but before I flew a drone over it, I would have, asked for clearance from the family and from the investigators. Hey, can I do this? And I don't see that he probably even ever bothered to go that route. I think he probably just said, well, I'll just do it and then I'll deal with the fallout. And I think that that's incredibly insensitive. I think that it's, incredibly intrusive. And, I think that you have to do something with regards to your humanity for the victims. And I think in this case that they've been, twice, thrice, or four times victimized by the media in many ways. And so he and they as a whole, I think, have just, added to that. So anyway, I think that, that's about all I can say about that, but it just does seem very, very insensitive.
Right. So I got a message in my email from someone who's close to this case. I'm going to be like the reporters, but it's true. I did get one. And I had information that I said in the last show that I actually thought was correct because it was coming out from the media. But it was not 100% accurate. And I'm going to do it from the other perspective because I do trust the person that's telling me. They're more closer to it than I am. But the blood splatter that was on the door, or that was outside the front of the house, by the stairs, whatever, the front of the house, not the blood splatter, man, the droplets of blood by the front of the house. My mind's going blank. Cover so many cases. Got a few mixed up here. I think the media, and maybe I'm wrong, but you never know, because sometimes they may not say it outright, but they're implying things that make you think something. And I don't always get a chance to stop and question that. I may run blindly. I mean, me and Russ have a habit of trying to question everything that's put into our head, but you can't get everything, or else you live a life of paranoia. But I was under the impression that the blood that was on the front of the house, or at the front of the house, was discovered by the media, and that they exploited that instead of trying to say, hey, maybe we should be on this property right now, and calling the lead investigation and say, hey, did you get all this? But I believe a lot of people were running with the narrative that when Brian ran up on the stairs, that he was the one to discover it. And basically that's what caused the police to close the crime scene, all this other stuff again, or to seal it. But that's not the case, even though I think it was being painted like that he was the person that saw it. And then basically when it went on the news, like, oh my God. And that's when they decided to seal it again, with the FBI now getting involved. There's some truth to that, but in the latter of it being put on the media. But technically what I found out from my message was that law enforcement already noted, they saw the blood. It wasn't forgotten, but I felt it was not. It wasn't not forgotten. It was not seen. It was seen. So again, if you guys know something different, let me know. But it goes after the home was returned to the family and crime scene tape was removed. Entin reported from directly outside Nancy's house in a widely shared segment, because I shared it. His team filmed and aired close-up footage of a visible blood trail or stains on the front area of the porch leading away from the doorway. That imagery quickly spread across mainstream and tabloid outlets. On camera, Entin notes that the sheriff office had released the house back to the family, and that unlike other big cases, there was no deputy posted, essentially saying authorities were done and no one was guarding it. Around the same time as footage circulated, the home was retaped as a crime scene, and officials acknowledged there was grave concerns about aspects of the scene, while also saying they had already collected blood evidence there. So law enforcement thus clearly knew about blood at the house, but his video gave the public and commentators the first detailed look at the trail on the porch. So this episode that Brian did, what is often described as proof that Entin found what law enforcement missed, because that's how it was being sold. So this episode is often described as proof that Entin found what law enforcement missed, or that he cared more. That was another avenue, that Entin cared more than the investigators doing the job. But even if the scene was technically released, it raises ethical and safety questions. Should media get that close to a location tied to an ongoing abduction and broadcast graphic details that overlaps with evidence? And the same images that drive ratings also show exactly where and how blood is present at the home, information that could be triggering for the family and potentially useful to anyone trying to understand what investigations can see. Can you imagine if that was so I think, let me just explain something before I get to the question here. When he got view of blood, that is going to be views. That's going to be clicks, right? And now that's something that you release out there, knowing that eventually the Guthrie family could see that. There was no care for the Guthrie family and how they would take that image. And I actually, as I said, I actually thought that he broke that they didn't see, that law enforcement missed it, because that's how it was being sold. Guys, if you watch some of these things, they make it look like that he brought it to people's attention and, oh my God, we missed out. What were we thinking? When technically, if you look at some of the other reports, I don't know, but at least what this person told me was that wasn't the case. That was already discovered and documented. Still should not have been released. Don't get me wrong. That's still wrong to release it, but it's not like they didn't see it. They saw it. And then the moment they cleared it, they acted like vultures. And by the way, that is something that wouldn't normally get released to the public. And I think what happened here, and I could be wrong, now this is just me guessing, if that's the case, then maybe the FBI may have saw that being released and said, yo, that shouldn't be released. And they may have started putting more effort to say, you got to go back and seal that, because that shouldn't have been released. You may say you're done, whatever it is, but that shouldn't have been released. The media is all over that right now. So Russ, as regular people watching this, does it feel more like he's helping by showing what's there, or more like he's stepping into territory that should have stayed between investigators and the family? So there's a lot there, Russ. This is one of the pivotal moments in this case, and it was sold as if he discovered it, when I found out that he may not have. Are you muted, Russ? Sorry about that.
Yes, I am. I think that probably what probably what he knew is that that was simply not the case. I think that, they'd been around enough. They knew what was being processed. They knew it was not being processed. And once again, they went in there for clicks and for ad space. I think that, probably what should have happened is they should have released the property in a step back process. They should have, kept it cordoned off. They should have allowed family members to come in through a different way. And then over time, they could have released, the perimeter and given the family time to do what they needed to do there to clean up the blood or do whatever. Law enforcement is not going to do that, because then it looks like, they went ahead and, tampered with evidence. So that would not have happened, but the family could have, fixed things, because once it's released, then there's, nothing left to do. There's no expectation of maintaining it for any reason beyond that. So I think that, just overall, those little games that he played, the ones that we've discovered, the ones that we've seen, the ones that we've at least interpreted as such, we may not have a clear idea of how much further these little games that he was playing went. And so that's my 2 cents worth.
No, it's worth way more than 2 cents. So look at the patterns, guys. If you take the last thing about him wanting to have the interview, it's amazing, right? Then you get the drone, and I got a little more left for us. Then you get the blood. I mean, hey Russ, let me just ask you a simple question, yes or no, because people are going to say, well, you know what? Law enforcement released the house. This is what the media does, because that was one of the things too. He's like, yeah, don't forget, that's what the media does. I'm doing my job, getting that story. Okay, I get it. But you mentioned before that you wanted to do the interview and that you would be sympathetic. You want to have sympathy, talk about her mom. Well, if that was the case, and if we look at your behavior, would you have chased for that blood and put it out there if you really cared about what Savannah and her family are going through right now? Or, basically, Russ, you think that at that moment when he did that, he really had sympathy or empathy for what they were going through?
No, obviously not. And I think that was, he wanted to blow that story up. He wanted to get it to a point where he got more clicks. So he made it look like, hey man, nobody knows about this blood, as if, and then he used that as an excuse to put this information out there so that there wouldn't be any blowback about, hey, you know what, we're filming blood. Maybe we shouldn't put this out there. I think that is kind of just glossed over. This was a sensationalization of the condition of the house at that point. What is the takeaway from that? I mean, they're being traumatized, the family, traumatized and re-traumatized with regards to that happening. They probably had already seen that blood. It may have been something that the investigators even needed to point out to them. It may have been something that they reported from the very beginning, because we knew that they were alarmed by the state of the house. And that might have been the very first thing they saw when they discovered that she was missing. So, again, to me, it just comes down to, games that the media is playing.
And I agree with you, because with Savannah Guthrie's interview with her friend on the Today Show, she mentioned that, they knew the Nest camera was gone, the blood on there. So I think they already knew that before the media had figured out. But I do remember for some reason that the narrative was being sold as if he discovered that. That's how I took it.
And you can also think about, what was he going to ask her? So how did you feel when you first came up the steps and saw the blood? It's just more sensationalization. I'm not saying that he was for sure going to do that, but I think I can assign that to him now. I believe that that's what he would have done.
And then I have got to go into the neighbor's yard, whether they have permission or not. You didn't have permission to shoot the area that you're shooting. So I kind of call this the media trespassing problem. So in an interview filmed by Entin, a neighbor, Laura, described seeing a new media guy, like a YouTube media guy, in another neighbor's backyard at about 3 a.m, poking around until she confronted him. It was one of the YouTubers. Could have been JLR, who knows, but it was one of the YouTubers. She says she told him he was trespassing and warns that people have guns around here. So she's literally on an interview with him, telling him about how people are going through their property and all this other stuff. And, Brian Entin's like, yeah, that must be hard. Pretty much he's making it look like, that he's not in agreement with what those YouTubers are doing. Yet, the man she described is not named as Entin, obviously. But the story appears on his platform. It captures the media environment around the case, multiple journalists and creators in the neighborhood at all hours, searching for new angles, footage, and exclusives. Entin's own day 23, then he says day 40, and other on-scene posts show a long-term media presence in the area. But now, when cameras and crews camp out on a residential street for weeks, the neighborhood starts to function like a set. Neighbors' privacy, safety, and peace are traded away so that content can keep flowing. Now, that's not a decision the neighbors made. It's a byproduct of the way the story is being covered. And it's funny how Laura pretty much kind of gives us the impression she's uncomfortable with what this person's doing, yet he's doing the same thing. Why? Because he's media, he's News Nation. That makes it more acceptable. So, Russ, if you lived on that street, would you feel like the media presence there was about helping Nancy? Or would it feel like your neighborhood was being used as a backdrop?
I think it would feel like the circus has come to town. And, I think that, there's been indications of that the entire community there, and the neighborhood specifically, that, it just became this feeding frenzy for the media. So I think that, why did the media have to do that? Why did they have to camp out there? There was nothing there, beyond the first 2 weeks or so of anything worth truly reporting. Well, they wanted to do the interviews. They wanted to do the, man on the scene with the house in the background, with the steps, with the blood, with, everything else there in order to once again sensationalize it.
Man, you are spot on, because how many times does he open up by saying day this? Oh, Nancy's house back there. That's the front of her house. That's the door. And that's just, I think the funny thing about covering this is a lot of people think that the people that know most about the case are the ones that are actually on site. And that is so far from the truth. That is so far from the truth. I become on site. I'm more annoying. I'm more intrusive. And that makes me more verifiable. So what happens is the public puts pressure to know more. They put pressure, that pressures them to put out more material, and then they start crossing boundaries. And it's slow and subtle until eventually the story is more about them. And it's true. I mean, when do you get to a point where, you may be covering from a distance, and then now you're in someone's backyard looking at that person's property, you're putting drones above it. I mean, that's literally, trying to make, I'm going to be that person. And it's slow and subtle, but we've seen it. We've seen it. Maybe you have some, I'll tell you here, I'll give you an example. You get someone that, like, let's say it's a YouTuber, which we all know, goes out to those sites and almost immediately gets aggressive with his approach, gets intrusive, goes on property, we get it. And then we get some that slowly start to do it. Whether they slowly do it or whether they do it right away, it's still aggressive. Doesn't make it right. And it's funny how Laura, the person he interviewed, says that kind of like, this is, what's going on here? And the person she's interviewing is like, yeah, that's kind of messed up. Well, you're doing it too. You're doing exactly what she was upset about. So now, broadcasting investigation details that compromise the element of surprise. So Entin's reporting and related coverage repeatedly surfaced specific investigative details, dates agents were asking neighbors about, which neighbors and vacant properties were being revisited, observations that some rooms inside the house appeared immaculate, talk of doors reportedly left open, and the fact that ransom notes, camera footage, and additional images were being reviewed. All of this helps the public feel up to date, but also signals where law enforcement is focusing. In an abduction case, it's reasonable to assume a suspect might follow coverage and tweak their behavior based on what media reveals. Meanwhile, the FBI publicly released suspect images and asked for tips dealing with the high-profile case under intense scrutiny. At the same time, NBC and law enforcement were ramping up security around Savannah and the Today Show because of ransom letters, crank letters, and safety worries. So there was enough real-world concern that details getting out could matter. So every small investigative detail becomes another segment, reel or a headline. The constant need for new information incentivizes sharing operational details that might feel like transparency, but can also undercut the element of surprise and, at worst, arm the wrong people with knowledge about the FBI and the sheriff's about what the FBI and the sheriff's office are doing. And again, it's funny how they hide behind the freedom of press, or we need them to be more transparent. No, you don't. Not doing an active investigation. No, you don't. Don't try to hide behind transparency and try to say that it's because we got to hold them accountable, make sure they're doing their job. No, you're actually screwing with safety and security and using transparency as if it's some right. So, Russ, as viewers, do you want this level of play-by-play about what investigators are doing? Or do you also worry it might actually hurt the chances of catching the person responsible and on another note, keeping the family safe or the neighborhood safe?
So, yeah, because of the type of republic that we live in, the freedom of the press is guaranteed, within the confines of the Constitution. And I think that is a good thing. I think that there are some things with regards to, institutional privacy, though, such as investigations, doing things that won't won't influence unduly future juries with regards to things, methods and sources, and in order to, really ensure the fairness and the process of investigations. We don't want people who, have nothing to do with the crime to suddenly be out there in the public's eye, where suddenly they're looking and they think, well, they cleared that guy, but he's absolutely guilty. And I saw that over and over again in some of these forums where, they were just sure that the brother-in-law did this and stuff, because they know more than the investigators. And it was kind of this rampant running, Dunning-Kruger type of thing, where suddenly everybody was an expert on things. And there was no basis for it. The way the guy looked, the way the guy talked, the amount of time he was on the media, the amount of time he wasn't on the media, all that's clear indication of guilt. And the media played into it. The media wanted the circus. The media wanted people to be engaged in forums offline and saying things and then coming back and being fulfilled by all of these other know-nothing people, being reinforced through their own confirmation bias. And it was just horrible. It really was.
Yeah, and by the way, guys, so when we say gaslight, we're trying to present a show to get people to think the other side, because obviously one thing about the media is they love isolation and control. They don't want anything to counter influence. And the problem is, if something does go against their narrative, the people that are saying it are fighting against a belief. And that belief is very strong, and it becomes a major obstacle in which people just say, nope, like Russ said, confirmation bias that's already been, when you're the first person to get the story out without knowing your facts, but because you're more concerned about being the first to write it out or get it out, you're creating the initial impact. And it's a very powerful foundation because it sets the template that the truth has to work around. And the problem is we're kind of at that point now where, there's a narrative going out there, and there are people that are literally, like Russ said, going after Tommaso, going after Annie, going after the family, saying there's no way the family could be cleared unless you find the suspect. I heard that from one of the prosecutors that they interviewed, and that's not true. That's not true. You can have absolute You know, that I know absolutely this person was here or there. I mean, it's not they can't be cleared until you find somebody. That's bullshit. That's pure bullshit. The police or the investigations, they know how to weed people out, and they don't always need to have the suspect to do that. They could weed people out. That's why even with the most recent ransom notes, I know for a fact from what I'm watching, and I'm going to lean on it as if it's a fact, that they don't mean anything, the ransom notes, because I'm going to tell you something. Whoever wrote those ransom notes wanted to push that to, well, first they pushed it to a local news, which didn't give them the play. So yes, then they pushed it to TMC, which they knew would let it out. They knew that. And then maybe at first, while the feds were looking into it, they didn't want TMZ releasing as much, even though now they are, but the first couple of ones they didn't. But when they release something like that, they know there's pressure. And that pressure will force law enforcement sometimes to act, because the greatest concern is, you know, we can't afford to be wrong here. So if this person is, you know, even if there's a percentage that they're saying something, then maybe we have to entertain it to some level. But now when they're at the point where I believe it's not being entertained at all, it's because they have definitively made a decision that this ransom notes that we're getting, this person who's sending it is really not, not in congruence with what we know at this point. That's why, one, I think they do have a direction, and that's why they can definitively say they're not acting on these ransom notes. And when TMZ said something about how they know it's true, no, I think, to be honest with you, we know it's true when they decide not to act on it, because they know the pressure of not acting on it. And I'm in leadership positions myself. If someone brings something to my attention and I know it may be bogus, but I'm not 100% sure it's bogus, I have to act on it. Because what about if it is turns out to be true? Then it's egg on my face. So having said that, when they make a definitive no, we're not moving forward on this, that's because there's enough evidence there and where they're going to be able to weed that out. And Russ has said it many times before. Investigations isn't always just about finding things. It's about weeding things out. And people forget that. And you can weed things out with certainty without having the suspect. Now, Russ, I got two more areas. Pivoting the narrative to the sheriff. So criticism, or is this just a convenient conflict? And I said convenient conflict because we mentioned in our shows before, it was going to go this way once the updates started dying, because they need to keep the story alive. So what do? They build controversy. They build things on absolutes. So as time went on without Nancy being found, Entin's coverage increasingly highlighted criticism of Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos. Anonymous insiders and outside commentators told him the initial team lacked homicide experience, which I did a video on. Could have been a search and rescue team at first. The first supervisor had never handled a homicide case before, and I think that's been disproven. But either way, where am I? And that decisions about scene security and communication were flawed. That I believe is true. He appeared in multiple segments and podcasts questioning the sheriff's honesty, discussing a search ban, and debating whether Nanos should be removed. And mind you, the attack on the honesty mattered because it does go with the narrative. And with that said, if you attack the honesty, then it's like, okay, well, then this person can't lead the investigation. I get it. But having said that, how much are we being spoon-fed? How much is really what's there and actually, or how much is it a narrative that's been created that's been spoon-fed to us slowly? So the context there is there's substantial independent criticism of how this case was handled, from PR missteps to questions about the integrity of the scene. Some of the sheriff's own statements have been questioned and then clarified later. So this is not manufactured out of the air. Real problems have been reported by others too, but the pattern and timing matter. That's what I'm saying here. So yes, you can continue to argue that, well, Sheriff Nanos did this. I get it. I understand that. But the pattern and timing, this is about Nancy right now. And by the way, to be honest with you, Nanos may have to remove himself because the media has made him the center of attention. And then the right thing to do is, you know what? You made me a distraction. So now I have to remove myself. So as hard evidence and physical development slowed, the sheriff's conflict became the new main plot that could sustain nightly segments and debate. Calling out officials is a valid journalistic function, but it also keeps the story hot, keeps the cameras rolling, and keeps Entin cast as the crusader. So Russ, from a layperson's point of view, when do you think holding the sheriff accountable crosses over into using that conflict as content when there aren't many new case facts?
So, first of all, let's just say that the media has a limited view as to what the sheriff is actually doing. I mean, what is he actually doing that they can see? And the thing that they can see is that he's held some press conferences. He has released some information with regards to some of the evidence, and that's about it. So we don't actually have a clear view as to other things that he's done behind the scene. There might be some horrible decisions that he's made behind the scene. There might be some fantastic decisions. Their view is incomplete. And for them to try and present what they can see with regards to the investigation as being whole and complete is farcical.
Yep. And guys, I tell you something. A lot of people are like, oh, you guys do this for views. I lose subscribers on this. Oh, trust and believe, I lose subscribers, but then I gain a more loyal base, which I find, hey, if I got to exchange for one for the other, I mean, if I'm doing a channel and I'm more worried about what other people are going to think about what I say, then I've censored myself and I lose out on my own authenticity. So, it's okay. Sometimes you got to filter out ones that are not open to other perspectives. I'm always respectful to other people, but when you comment and say you're jealous, all that stuff, I will literally delete you, remove you from my channel forever, because that's not what we're allowed to have, different perspectives. I have someone I get along with famously on this channel and they have a different perspective, but they respect mine because they respect the person delivering it. So I got two more areas, Russ, then we're done. The brand building, infrastructure. This was never just about Nancy. So Entin is not just a reporter on this story. He's also the host of Brian Entin Investigates. That's a YouTube channel, a branded podcast promoted as boots on the ground for the biggest stories. News Nation has packaged Missing the Nancy Guthrie mystery as part of a broader missing franchise with him front and center. His social channels track, the days, day 23, day 40, and beyond of him in Tucson. He appears on outside shows, Hot Mics and Billy Bush, the Megyn Kelly Show, or the radio program as the go-to voice of the case. And guys, he did try to do two smaller cases, but didn't get enough attention. But it doesn't matter if the case is small or not. If it needs awareness, give it awareness. And then that's why I think he also went back to Arizona, because they knew that the views weren't happening when you were further away. And here's the funny thing, guys. That's my goal on this channel. It's not always about the trending cases. I need you to trust me. If you trust me, then I could bring you cases and you follow it because you trust me. And that will allow me to bring cases to you that you may not be aware about, the cases that require the awareness. But if you're only following me because I'm covering these trending cases, that doesn't work for me either, because I want to bring in cases that we work our asses off that are not as known. And those are the ones that need the coverage, because when everyone else wants to hop on these other cases, they already got the momentum. They got the news. They're just trending for views. What about the cases, as I mentioned, like Michaela Settles, or the case recently with the child that was suffering from a mother who had Munchausen by proxy? I mean, these are stories that for some reason don't get the national attention. And that's what we could do here on this platform is go ahead and provide those stories. So he has said he's become emotionally invested in cases and that it's hard to separate feelings from reporting when he immerses himself this deeply. He also points to this coverage as a model of how he and his network handle major stories. Now, there's a clear content and brand machine around his role in this case. Network specials, a personal podcast, daily shorts and reels, and constant guest spots. The more central he is to the Nancy Guthrie story, the more it reinforces Brian Entin as a brand in the true crime media space. So as true crime consumers, Russ, do you think it's possible for journalists to build a whole personal brand around these tragedies without starting to put their own career needs ahead of what's best for the families?
Well, yeah, I think it can be
Like
done.
we do.
The problem is, going back to the mainstream media. Okay, so you've got the mainstream media, and they are formulaic. They know it works, and they use it every time, and that's part of the problem. is when you have something that works every time, which is primarily which is probably sensationalizing things, then you do that every time. And if all you're doing is sensationalizing things, oh look, we found blood on the in the carport or at the entryway, and then you just start blowing that up. You don't need to worry about the truth, because by golly, you'll manufacture it. And so my true vision is to provide people with what they want to know and what they need to know. And I think that, by doing that, and I think that that's the most respectful way to look at an audience, is that, there are a lot of things that you and I can tell the public about what really goes on in the criminal justice system. It's easy, if we wanted to just, trash all the time, everything that goes on. But I think that our shared experience is bigger than that, because, I have worked with some of the most fantastic people on earth that, have really, put their lives and blood and sweat into keeping the public safe. I have this viewpoint, that we are the keepers of the wolves. We keep them out of the flock that's out there in the public. And the media, on the other hand, they do everything they can to tear down law enforcement, to tear down correctional law enforcement, and to try and always give people a jaundiced, self-reinforcing idea about it all the time. And, it's like they pick over the bones of something that happened, pointing out certain things to give you a jaundiced idea about what's going on. And then they move on, and they never point out about, how laws work, about how self-defense works, about how use of force works, about the context in which things happen and why that matters, and why the totality of circumstances and things like case law, like Tennessee versus Garner, or Connor versus, I forget what it is now, Connor versus Graham, and all of those things matter. They don't ever, dissect any of the real story. They just want to show you the gore and then move on to the next pile of gore. And, great for them. It works for them. I think that, we talk about transparency a lot. I'll bet that neither CBS or CNN or NBC or ABC is ever going to show you what they were charging their advertisers for coverage, or not coverage, for ads while they were doing stories on Nancy Guthrie. I'll bet that they won't. So anyway, I guess that about wraps it up for what I have to say on that.
Yeah, and then guys, I want to mention something. Me and Russ are a very good judge of character, a very good judge of people, because yes, we worked in, Russ is already retired. He worked in the toughest facilities that California has. I'm in my state working at the toughest facilities. I've worked in so many different prisons at this point. I get transferred back and forth. But I've worked at everything with females, maximum, problematic units. I've worked with overseeing the facilities that house just solely sex offenders. I have major experience in dealing with these individuals, and the books I have, just to show you, this book right here, Breaking Boundaries, dealing with undue familiarity, books like this, Inmate Manipulation Encoded, these deal with the psychological acts of manipulation. You know how I learned all that stuff? Because I held my ground, and when you hold your ground against manipulators, they take off their mask and you find out who they really are. But that's dealing with them every day, and not having the fear of the many different games they can play, or not being so gullible. And then when I have a sense of something, that's not just me not liking somebody. That's something in my 24 years of experience of dealing with individuals and saying, something's not right. It's a gut instinct. And especially when people say, oh, but he's so nice, he's so nice, he's so nice. Nice is a performance. It's strictly a performance. If I went around and said, hey, every prison, every inmate here is nice, I would lose my job within a second because they're all nice until you say no. So last part I have, Russ, is why Savannah almost certainly won't and shouldn't do the interview. So I got 4 reasons here. One is network loyalty and contract. Savannah is a longtime Today anchor with a renewed NBC contract and a central role at the network. Her first extended interview about her mom's disappearance was with Hoda on Today in-house, doing a similar deep emotional interview on a competitor's platform about her own family trauma would be unusual and possibly difficult from a contract and loyalty standpoint. So that's the most superficial one, but it is a reason. The family has seen how he operates, Brian Entin. I think this could be a case. They have likely seen the drone shots, the porch blood footage, the terrain walkthroughs, and the intense public criticism of their local sheriff, because they know this sheriff, and agencies they publicly thanked. They also lived through a wave of ransom and threat letters, serious enough that NBC and law enforcement had to increase security. That may not feel like a safe or respectful environment for Savannah's most vulnerable thoughts. Again, because they're chasing the update. And if you want to, or she's going to be interviewed, she needs to trust because she's extremely vulnerable. The family itself is vulnerable and showing property, exploiting the vulnerability. I just want to show her sympathy about her mom. Stop. Reason 3, he has already made them part of his story without permission. So Entin has made the house, the street, and the case central to his reporting identity on this story. With repeated day X updates and specials, Savannah has never publicly asked him to be their spokesperson. Sitting down with him now would complete his narrative arc more than giving her something she hasn't already chosen to say on today's show. So basically, sitting down with him is more about completing his narrative as opposed to what she needs to be said, because to be what she needs to say. And by the way, that interview she had on that's her choice. And then to go and go on these public platforms and pressure who has a connection to her. I mean, are we fucking kidding? And nobody could see that in context. Like, are you kidding me? She's grieving, and you want people that have a connection with her to knock on her door. Hey, Brian wants you to be interviewed by him. What are we doing here? And last one I got is she has already said what she needs to say. She's already made public pleas, praised law enforcement for working tirelessly, and begged anyone involved to do the right thing. She has not suggested she needs a News Nation exclusive to reach people. Her silence toward Entin speaks on its own. And I want to mention something. If he was to start doing the questions that he wanted with her, which is really about the investigation, now if she says that she, agrees with the sheriff, whatever it is, what's sad is this is the person that's deeply involved with this case, and her opinion about what's happening with her mother, what's happening, the family's opinion. And again, just saying that the people involved in investigations acting tirelessly, that's the anchor of what we feel right now about how good that investigation is going. It looks like it's something she's in agreement with, and trust me, if she wasn't, she'd say it. But here's the thing: if she wasn't, I'm sorry, if she's being questioned by him and she keeps on kind of pushing that she's in agreement, let's say this happens and he keeps on challenging it, do you know, instead of people siding with Savannah and their family, they would side with Entin, saying that the family's foolish. They just don't know. We got to get Nanos out of there. You wouldn't even care what the family says anymore. And when I started thinking that, that's when I know who's pulled himself in the center of the story. You know when someone's been pulled in the center of the story, when you're minimizing what the victim or the victim's family is saying. So, Russ, if you were Savannah's friend, would you encourage her to sit down with him for another big interview, or would you tell her she's already said enough in a safer place?
Oh, I would tell her that she's said enough. I think that she has been a rock for her family. I think that she has done everything that she could for her family. It's evident that she feels some sort of, I don't want people to take this the wrong way, But I think that people will know what I mean by this term. I think that she feels a great deal of survivor's guilt with
Not yet,
regards to this. I know that we don't know the final outcome of this, although it does seem apparent in some ways. But that guilt is there, and it's real. And I feel terrible for them. And Savannah Guthrie is not someone that I would just say, like, Savannah and Guthrie and I would have very differing views about politics and about the profession with regards to journalism. But all of that, takes a backside with regards to this crime. This was a terrible thing, and I wouldn't wish this on anyone. I just think that, right now it's become about something other than the victims, which is Savannah and her family and Nancy. And it's taken on something that is completely different from that which it actually is.
Yeah, and look at some of the titles on some of these videos that he puts out, like why the latest Nancy Guthrie ransom notes could be real. New ransom note claims to know where Guthrie is. Here's the thing about this. We talked about this in ambiguous loss. She needs to manage uncertainty, which is a balance between hope and despair. That's why they tell the families, don't watch this when you're going through something like this, because, she doesn't need false hope. She also doesn't need to fall into despair. She needs to manage the uncertainty, and shows like this. Hey, guess what? We got a ransom note that may tell you where Nancy is. She doesn't need to hear that.
I think you're right, and I think that I hope she's doing the right thing, which would be to let it be filtered to her through the FBI and through the sheriff's department. All of this, it's just noise, and I think that that's part of the problem here. Is there's a lot more thunder than there is flash.
Yeah, and look at these. I'll give you four more. FBI finds more images from Nancy Guthrie's camera. Let me read the rest of it because it's cut off. Hold on. The rest of the title's cut off. Hold on. FBI finds more images from Nancy Guthrie's camera, but what's missing is odd. Day 41. I mean, okay. FBI interested in weekend before Nancy Guthrie went missing. Is that information we really need out there? The moment whoever that source is, even if they shouldn't be leaking it, responsible reporting should call back and say, hey, listen, we found this out. Should we report it or not? Because I think, to be honest with you, the local news networks, they're doing what Savannah and the family would want. They're doing what they don't come out with a lot of random bullshit. FBI asking Nancy Guthrie's neighbors about construction crew. Should the sheriff be removed? Who are you? Who are you to say should the sheriff be removed? Mysterious internet outage. FBI back in Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood. Is the suspect closer to home or closer than we think or whatever? It's closer. Hold on, because that's cut off too.
It's all tabloid headlines, and then you read the story and there's nothing about the headline in there.
No, nothing. Yeah. Oh, how dangerous the terrain is. Look at this one. Nancy Guthrie insider speaks out. Who's close to it? There's no even. Who's the insider? You want to say stuff like that, and it's funny how you can attack a sheriff if the person doesn't want to put his name on it. Well, he'll get retaliated. You have whistleblower. He'll be protected under whistleblower. Renowned DNA. No, where's the other one here? Look at this one. Where's the one with the desert near Nancy Guthrie's home is vast and has history of violent crimes. You think that Savannah wants to hear that? If you really care about Savannah, if you look at the shows we've done dealing with ambiguous loss, let me just mention a couple of things because we don't chase every update here. But these are the shows that hardly get any. He gets hundreds of thousands. I got dealing with ambiguous loss. That's 100% for the family. And then there's one I did with what a family could be going through when you have someone that's been kidnapped and you don't have answers, or someone that goes missing. this is really, like you said, it's just tabloid. FBI visits gun shops. I mean, what could the FBI? And then it's funny when the investigation goes nowhere. Whose fault is it really? You're exploiting every step we take. And the funny thing is do you think it's going nowhere because we're not telling you something? Like, is that all of a sudden because you're so entitled that if we don't tell you something, you think it's going nowhere? He should have just stayed in Florida and let them do what they need to do. Search in the desert intensifies. Detectives inside Annie Guthrie's home also looked inside a septic tank. Guys, he's giving them play-by-play every day. How does people not see anything wrong with that? I mean, are you so thirsty for information that this is okay, and then blaming people for not doing their job? You're exploiting every step that they take. God, it's frustrating. The last part I got, Russ, it says, so just signs that this is about him, not Nancy. Just to revisit. So again, you got the multiple day X post, day 23, day 40, day 62 highlights his ongoing presence as a storyline in itself. He publicly crowdsources access to Savannah through mass audience outlets instead of staying behind the scenes. I mean, guys, using a national platform with all the followers he has and says, hey, if you have a connection to her, can you basically pressure her into an interview? What are we doing here, guys? She's grieving. Her family's grieving. Can we not see something wrong with that, just in general? He calls the potential Savannah interview amazing, language that sounds like a personal milestone. I thought that was very juvenile. He houses the case inside his own named podcast and appears everywhere as the reporter on the case. I'll guarantee you other reporters are probably upset with him too, especially the local news. That's why I think they're doing things a little bit differently. He repeatedly broadcasts sensitive investigative details and neighborhood movements that also serve as ongoing content beats, the kind of information that could be useful to someone following the case for the wrong reasons, which he admitted on one of the shows that he knows people are watching him. He said it in the Kohlberger case too, but he says it as if he's bragging because that's how big his reach is. As case facts thin out, he leans into sheriff conflict, which keeps the story alive and himself in the crusade mode or crusade role. He films and airs close-up blood imagery from the home, creating one of the most shocking visuals associated with the case. And if I had sympathy for the family, would I have done that? Remember, even the Kohlberger case, the family was upset because the discovery got released to the media about how brutal the murders were, and the family didn't even know about it. And then you get people like Brian Entin saying, yeah, that's wrong, and we definitely don't want to do that. But then here you are, you did it. Put the blood out there, so you did exactly. Or, you're having that conversation with Laura, the neighbor, and saying, hey, yeah, this person's in your backyard, and oh, yeah, that's weird, but you're doing it, whether you have neighbor's permission or not, because that's all that changed. All that changes, he got the neighbor's permission to do what the other person was doing. It was wrong regardless. You're in the neighbor's property, so you could take pictures of Nancy's. Let's see. As case facts stay now, he films and air close up. Okay, and he seeks a Savannah exclusive, not at her request, but because landing the grieving daughter of a national anchor would cap off the arc as he has been building. So I want to ask this question to the audience as we wrap up. If Russ wants to answer it, you're more than welcome to. But I got one more question I want to ask, and this is just to wrap up. And this is a perspective. That's all we're providing. It's another perspective that's not out there, and that's fair. Because you could go with what you got, or you can go with this, or you can at least be in the middle. But me and Russ, we're very big on, hey, there's a perspective that's missing here that should be covered. Well, you got to be careful because, right now everybody's going this way, but that doesn't make it right. Or because the mass people see it that way, that doesn't make it right. That's when we need to speak up. That's your crusade. Not when everybody's going in one direction, but when they're going in the wrong direction, who's going to say, hey, hold on, stop, slow down, just think about this, and then you're a little bit more informed. But again, question to you guys, when you step back and look at all of these things I just mentioned together, I mean, does it feel to you like this coverage is mainly for Nancy and her family or mainly for Brian and the platforms that feature him? And if you guys may say I'm doing it, guys, look at my material. Look at the stuff I cover. I'm losing subscribers and I'm still covering it. And I don't shift my story. I stay with my narrative. I stay what's true to what I feel. And I think whoever connects to this, whether my count goes big or count goes small, they're connecting to the authenticity. And as I said, I love her account to go big because I can have a bigger voice for cases that need awareness. But I also want people that follow me because they believe in the message, follow Russ because they believe in the message, not because it's a trending case. Russ, I mean, would you like to answer that last question? You have anything you want to say in closing?
I think that I would just, go off on some tangent again. So I just want, people, to have confidence in what they're being told, and to get some perspectives that aren't the easy thing to get. Whatever happened to real investigative reporters? They come in, they flash a great big headline, and then it's over with. I've worked now on a couple of my Substacks. I have one dedicated to corrections, of course. I have another one dedicated towards more political events. And man, I go and look at the things that I've written, and there's very few journalists out there that are going into the same depths or analyzing it from a different perspective, or looking at things from outside the box. And all they want is they want to support the narrative that supports their agenda, and they want clicks and stuff. So anyone that wants to visit any of my Substack stuff, have at it, and take a look at what I don't want to pat myself on the back, but take a look at what I think real journalism looks like, because I think that some of the stories I've got out there were not covered by the mainstream media at all, and some of them are national stories, and they're examined from perspectives that no one else had. Who else out there is doing that? I don't know, but take a look, see what you think.
And guys, I've had family members reach out to me when I did the case with the Kimberly, the young girl, 12 years old, that got killed by a water thermal in school. I had her uncle on, and we had a discussion, but he reached out to me. I didn't chase for him. And then when he gives me information, I don't run with it. I ask, and if he says, well, you can cover it, I said, yeah, but you know what? Let me wait on this, because let me just make sure. And he goes, okay. And then he'll cover it. We're going to probably revisit that case again because of the, there was an arrest of a juvenile. I'm going to reach out to him again because he did text me, but I'm waiting what schedule works. And the Camila Mendoza case. I had someone reach out to me from their family because I was doing responsible coverage of that, and they gave me information I never shared, still haven't shared. And that's information, when that case was popular, that was the information that could have literally stopped the bullshit stories about, oh, there's got to be trafficking. Me and Russ covered this. There's got to be human trafficking. They're collecting girls, and they're trying to go ahead, and Brian was part of this, and they're trying to connect these 3 cases in Texas as if it's a major trafficking thing. And when they found out it wasn't, when the young girl had killed herself, the other girl, I think they wind up finding,
she was a runaway.
Yeah, runaway. And the other one didn't want to. The story's gone because they couldn't get their narrative, and he was part of that too. I knew prior, guys, when they were pushing the narrative about the sex trafficking, whatever it is, the human trafficking, I already had the family tell me what they thought it was. They just didn't know where she did it at because there was a history there. But we kept it quiet. Now it's known because it's been released, but we kept it quiet. They were running this bullshit narrative, and at the end of the day, after they found out about this and their narrative turned out not to be true, where was the respect to the family? You exploited her as if it was some sex trafficking ring. And then when she unfortunately took her own life because of depression, maybe being overwhelmed, she had a lot of things going on. That's it. Not enough story for me. And you move on to the next thing. Where was her day 1, Brian? Where was her day 2? Where was her day 3, day 4, day 5? You did a story recently about men getting drugged. I even covered. I thought that was a great angle. Where's day 2 on that? Where's day 3 on that? That's because they weren't viewed videos. I figured when there's cases that have enough coverage, maybe if you want to touch on some things, but there's other cases out there that really need that coverage. The Michaela Settles case, the support I've been getting on that case, but that case wasn't known. But it was a case I saw on my feed. Me and Russ has covered cases that are not known, that are just as crazy. They just don't got the media's attention. Check out our videos. Check out some of the cases that we cover. Sometimes we get a chance to revisit, and sometimes there's just no updates, or sometimes, we're covering so many different ones. One of our followers will come back and say, Gans, you just gave an update on this. Can you get our back on this? Not a problem. And by the way, this ain't our full-time job. We both have other jobs, and we commit time here to get the awareness out there. And it takes a lot to find these facts out and put something out there as best as you can. And then once you get comfortable with it, going back and revisiting it less scripted so you can dive into these dialogues. But again, it may come off as attack, guys, but the passion's not really I don't know if the passion that I'm getting right now is really because I'm aggravated with him and what he's doing, or just the fact that we've been always at the center of media for negative shit. And when does it stop? And now that I've been involved in true crime, I just realized something else. It's not even always on corrections. Man, they want a story. They get their story, and it doesn't matter for the victims. They're not first and foremost. They're a story. They're a fucking headline. And it is upsetting. And man, when they get a chance to zing at the people doing the investigation, they do that. Watch it. They will always try to tell you how they could do their job better. So guess what? Here we are telling you the same thing. Be a journalist, be fair, and be objective. But of course, they'll correct us, yet they could tell us how to do our job. And they could tell Russ how to be a better correctional officer. But then when Russ tells them how you want to be a better journalist, Russ is not qualified to tell them that. Ain't that the truth, Russ? Man, is that frustrating. All right, guys, I'm on event. And Russ, I'm sorry, man, we're on event. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. Stay safe.